Ashley, you can see the screen share? Thumbs
Yes.
up, someone? Awesome. Okay, so this session is supporting Black boys responsive and effective teaching. So we're going to jump right in. So thank you for that intro, Ashley. I'd just like to offer a little bit more context around like why I do this work and who I am. This is my 28th going on. This August will be 29 years that I've been in early childhood and elementary education. I'm from Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. I called Stone Mountain, Georgia, or the Atlanta area home over 2 decades ago. So some of you may remember me, and I've called California home for the last 20 years. Former preschool teacher, center director, children's services manager, and mental health consultant, specifically with Head Start there. Some ways around I see this work and why I do this work: culturally responsive practices, which actually rest on top of multiculturalism and social justice, but culturally responsive practice basically understands the social and cultural pieces of which children show up, all right? I'm guided by family-centered practice, which really understands the context and conditions from how we receive children, which doesn't go against child-centered learning, but so much of early childhood always focuses on child-centered learning, and we forget that all children come to us from families, and that's important. I value teacher voice in all the work I do as a coach, as a trainer, as a PD leader. And in learning stories, I use a lot of learning stories as a formative assessment with center directors and managers when I'm doing larger work with them. My work is guided by anti-bias and anti-racist lens, that cyclical part of teaching and learning. And I'm really pulled in by Jung's theory of the psyche's role in how our personalities development. So just a little bit about me. When I do this work, I really do this work, and what sustains me in the hope of helping adults who care and educate young children in different settings, in different places, in different spaces, because I believe when young children are afforded opportunities from the inside out, that's how we become positive, productive citizens, and that citizenry starts prenatally, all right? So let's just jump right in. So this is a virtual learning process. So we're going to raise some awareness about Black boys, and we're going to learn some new skills. And if we had time and if we were in person, we would actually practice those skills. Make use of the chat box to share your thoughts, your feelings, your reactions, any resources you want to share that's relevant to the topic. We're using the chat box throughout our time together to really broaden our learning. So one big umbrella piece that I want to share with you all is this quote from Neil Horn, who directs the Early Head Start Mental Health Center that provides TA across the country. So he said in Florida years ago, one need not be a therapist to be therapeutic. I'll say it again, one need not be a therapist to be therapeutic. So what we mean by that is that no matter who we are, we can see Black boys, we can let them know that we see them, we hear them, and that they're valued in this way that is calming and centered. And we want to use that to guide our learning today around how are we therapeutic with young children, or how can we build becoming more therapeutic with young children in this work. So we're just going to jump right in. I'm not going to give you, in this presentation, we're not going to do a bunch of presenting the problem, because we all know this, and you can go on YouTube and just type in Walter Gilliam or preschool expulsion, and a bunch of webinars that are recorded will pop up and give you all this data. But I really just want to center our work around the 4 drivers that we know exist for little Black boys around preschool expulsion. And that first driver is structural quality. So what we mean by structural quality is what's in place there. And what we know is, when there are too many children in the room with the teachers, that's a driver of expulsion, around high teacher-child ratios. When teachers feel a sense of hopelessness, I'm not helpful here, they develop a high sense of helplessness, and they want to refer children out. We actually know that private and faith-based childcare actually have been, the data says that we expel children more than any other childcare. Children who are in care for long days, so those 8-10-hour days that some children are in care, we know that that contributes to expulsion. Programs that have little structure, or they're really restrictive and rigid, the teacher's really restrictive, and when we don't have access to supports like mental health consultation, education specialists, or a coach, All of those are structural components. So what we mean by structural components, these are the pieces that we've always used in early childhood. So think of Itters and Eckers back in the day, not the most revised version of Eckers, but they were all structural. What's there? We used to deem that as quality. That's foundational. We now know that structural quality supports process quality. Process quality is what coaches do. They come in and help teachers understand how they're using materials, how they're working with children, what they're doing. So the structural pieces have to be in place for the process pieces to work. And they both support positive child outcomes, which is why we do this work. All right. So the second driver is like implications for program quality. How are we understanding families? How are we understanding our communities? Are we afraid of the families and afraid of the children that we're saying we want to work with? All of those are program implications that actually drive suspension and expulsion. The third one, which is probably my biggest one, is lack of child development knowledge. Lack of child development knowledge, which means I have some knowledge of the culture, families that I'm working with. I understand typical and atypical development, and I understand what are my touch points, like what aspects of this make me feel uneasy. I understand emotions and how they're different across cultures, and I understand the disparities around how we've long pathologized suspension and expulsion for what Walter Gilliam says, big Black boys. So could you imagine that triple threat, big Black boys, really referring to 2, 3, and 4-year-old little children, but big Black boys is how he actually responds to it in this way. That is the problem. But if we understand child development, I just want to jump ahead and say, if we actually understand that behavior is a normal part of development, then we actually show up differently. So the fourth driver is understanding trauma in its context, understanding how trauma is pervasive and how it shows up. But this isn't a trauma training, so we don't want to go down that trauma track. And I would offer you to all in Georgia and the Atlanta area, if you're doing trauma-informed care and trauma-informed practices are a way to start, but that's not the end all. If no one's introduced you to trauma growth, because that's where the strategies are, you need to understand what trauma growth is, specifically when we're talking about Black children and families. All right. So let's jump right in. So the headline, and this was the University of North Carolina's research from a researcher there that said African-American boys tell better stories in preschool that lead to their reading and literacy behaviors. But we also know that little Black boys are actually told to stop talking at circle, to sit down when they want to stand up and help the teacher read the book. So all of their behaviors that show up as curious, capable learners get smashed as early as possible and becomes a problem. It becomes a problem because we don't understand child development and we don't understand what those behaviors are. We've been trained to see them as problematic when they're actually not problematic. They're showing up as capable learners and we push it out of them early and often. So now I just want to ask you a question of impact, and you can use the chat room. You can use the chat room to answer this question. What part of the body has the most neuroreceptors? Don't Google it. Don't Google it. What part of the body has the most neuroreceptors? Think about it. Antoinette said the hands. Talia says, I'm guessing the hands. Cobb said the eyes. Tressie said the eyes. Charmaine said the brain. Kim said the eyes or the ears. Bridget said the eyes. Ms. Suda said the brain. What part of the body has the most neuroreceptors? Thank you for typing that in there. The fingers and the hands, the brain, the hands. Okay, so most people are saying the fingers and the hands or the brain keeps popping up. So let's answer that question. Those of you who put the hand, you're absolutely correct. It is our hands that have the most neuroreceptors. So let's think of young children, and let's think of little Black boys who touch and want to feel everything. That teacher who's reading that book or showing that new material in class, and they kind of get up and they want to come touch it. They're basically saying, I'm interested in what you're doing, Ms. Jones, so I need to touch it. I want to feel it. And then that oftentimes goes sideways instead of the teacher leaning in and says, oh, Sean is really interested in this. So Sean, you can come hold it while I talk about it. Or you know what? Stand right here beside me, and when I'm done, you can be the first person to hold it. So it's shifting how we respond to these behaviors that we've largely seen as problematic. So before we get into all the strategies, I just want to set the context for a lot of you said brain. So I'm going to quickly give you what I like to call a quick and dirty session on brain states, just so we put it in context around what's happening in our brains and what's not happening in our brains. So I actually recolored this. So I got this offline from, as you can see, where it comes from the model. But I like to use, when I talk about brain states, red, yellow, and green, because it resembles our stoplight, which is really, really simple for people to get. Red means what? Stop. Yellow means what? It doesn't mean speed up. That's what I think it meant. It actually means prepare to stop. And green means go. So the green part of our brain is the thinking part of the brain. The yellow part of our brain is where our emotions live. And the red part of the brain is the part that says, do all you must to stay alive. Okay? Those are simplistic ways to understand what's happening here for not just young children, but for adults. But we're specifically going to be talking about little Black boys today in their brains. So that red part of the brain is a survival state. You know, that's where our heart rate, our temperature, our blood pressure, all of that's regulated there. And then in our cerebellum, that's where sleep is regulated, our arousal system, and motor regulation. So think of babies. Think of when an infant comes into the world, because our brain develops from the bottom up and from the back front. Okay? Or Bruce Perry, who I adore, says, he uses this hand model. He says the bottom up, but the brain starts this way, then it begins to open. And what his research has found with over 300,000 children is that there's something that we did not know that happens 2 months after birth. That 2 months after birth, the part of the brain, because you remember bottom up, back front, what they found was that children at 2 months who are in households that are chaotic, and then they get adopted or put into foster care and are in this healthy middle-class home, what they found was when those children ended up being 14, they started having problems. And what they found out was at 2 months after birth, even though this part of the brain up here wasn't fully developed, the developed part was already sending signals up to the underdeveloped part. So children who are experiencing trauma, they're experiencing abuse and neglect, or just chaos at 2 months, it's sending signals to the underdeveloped part of the brain. So when that part of the brain begins to develop, that stuff we begin to see in their lives. I think that's phenomenal, because it says a lot that we did not know around the underdeveloped and the developed parts of the brain and how they're connected, okay? And what behaviors we might see as the brain starts to develop. So the yellow center is really the emotional center. You know, I'm sure all of us have said or heard somebody's in their feelings. She's just in her feelings today. What they're really saying is they're in their emotional state. You know, they're talking about how they're feeling. They're not really thinking about it. They're going on and on. So their behavior is wrapped around the feeling that they might not even be able to name, which is oftentimes when we're in our feelings, we're telling stories, we're giving narrative, we're recalling something. We're never saying, oh, I felt angry, I felt dismissed, I was pissed off, I was upset, I was frustrated. That becomes the learning lift for us to actually attach a word to the feeling, because when we name something, neuroscience has found that when you can call a thing, it actually helps to slow us down. And I'm using this language because these are the strategies that we have to help children develop. But for them to get it, we've got to get it. The importance of naming emotions as a regulator and as a strategy. The third part is really the executive center. That's just where logic and thinking happens. Even though our brain is integrated, when the top part is activated, that's when we make our best decisions. If we're living as a 4-year-old in that red zone, we're not making logical decisions, we're acting on threat and on behavior, thinking that we have to do that. But we're going to learn more about that. I'm going to move us forward. So here are some pieces that really are important to understand when little Black boys are in this stress state. They're really asking the world, am I safe? Because they're really saying, I don't feel too safe, Miss Susie. So can you help me feel safe? You know, it's a developmental need. Most of you have heard of fight, flight, or freeze, but there are two other brain states that we actually don't talk about that I think are important specifically for Black people and Black populations. And those types are flocking. So Bruce Perry says, and this changed the game for me, y'all. All right, I'm making myself sweat. I'm gonna have to unbutton the top button, so forgive me for those who want me to stay buttoned up at the top. but this thing called flocking. So this is when little children say, you know, Mr. Dominique, did you hear that? Miss Charmaine, did you see that? Mr. Sean, did you feel that? And too often the teacher says no, and then we keep moving. So this is that state that children are in as they're being elevated to that flight, fight, or freeze state, but they're not there yet. So even if I didn't see it, feel it, or touch it, what we should be saying is, I didn't see it. What did you see? Tell me about it. That narrative is the strategy, getting them to talk about it, which says, I see you, I feel you, it's important to me. Let's co-regulate. Let me help you calm down. Really, really, really. Bonnie, actually, there's a link I'm gonna put in. I think I can put it there now. So there it is, Bonnie. All this, the slides are in the Dropbox. So just link the slides there. They're recording the session also. I'm not sure where the recording is housed or anything about that. You're gonna have to talk to BCDI about that. But the slides from my earlier presentation and this one are right there, Bonnie. Thank you for reminding me. But that flocking is really important for us to stop the stress state from increasing. Really, really, really important. The other one, this faint one, we're going to talk about this in a different slide later around a misbehavior and a stress behavior and how we're often, specifically when it pertains to little Black boys, not understanding the behavior correctly. And then of course, there's some structures that you can use to support that in the context of your classroom, which is the checklist. There's another handout that actually I didn't put in the Dropbox, I'll add it there. That's really these three for teachers or coaches or directors to guide their staff through in using these states as a way to plan. So the emotional state, children are saying, do you love me? Am I valued here? They're looking for connections. Here, we've got to start giving them emotional language for how they're feeling. But what we find is we want them to do it, but most of us have never used emotional language. So it becomes really, really hard. Then in that executive state, which is the go state, that's when we're saying, you know what, Dr. Bisa, I'm here to learn. I feel safe, I feel seen, I feel soothed, I'm using emotional language. Now I can problem solve because I'm competent, I'm ready to learn something. Then what we have to do is to support that learning in that thinking brain, okay? So I gave you all of that quickly just because it's a short period of time, but now we're gonna watch a little video. We're gonna watch a video of Rebecca, who's from Mississippi, and showing the Messiah. I want you to pay attention to Messiah in the blue shirt, because what Rebecca skillfully does is she guides Messiah from the red zone to the yellow zone up into the green zone, and then watch his behavior at the end. This is the brain state at its best, the teacher and the child going in sync when it could have gone the other way for this little Black boy. All right, so let's watch it, and then Jean, I'll respond to your question after the video. Whenever the video plays.
Well, we're looking for, what do you have? What is that? But you gotta find the big one and the little one. Like, I found a big elephant. Where's the little elephant? Oh, there's the little elephant. And then you put your trucks together. Hey, Sean, you put your trucks together, because watch this. Watch. You guys, now, it's like a puzzle. You have to fit them together. Like, hey! Yay! You did the big truck and the little truck. Can we go get the elephant so we can do it too? Why not? Hey, Messiah, it seems to me like you're a little frustrated, but I don't know why. Can we go get the elephants and let's try to put them together? Why not? Why not, Messiah? I'll put them together if you want me to. Oh, I found the little cat. That's a hat. That's not a cat. Oh, is that the cat? Okay, now I'm going to try to put them together. Thanks, Sean.
I put that together too.
Oh, big little.
That's not little, that's too big.
That one is really big, isn't it?
It's not too big.
It's not
Yes, yes, little.
Yeah, that's a little one. That's right.
That's little.
But you're kind of hurting my ears when you scream, and I don't understand why you're mad. Can you tell me? Hey,
No.
Remember, just say, yeah. It kind of hurts our ears when we scream. I want to see you do a puzzle, please. But I can't find that big crayon. Maybe it's under here. Oh, no, that's not it. I need the other crayon.
I found it.
Oh, you found it. Can you put them together?
Yeah.
Okay. Awesome. Hey, you did it. You really, really did it. Can my cat live right there on top?
Yeah.
All right. Now let's see what else.
Froggy.
Froggy. Oh, I found the little frog.
Yay.
Yeah, where's the big frog? Oh. You got it. Now I think the only thing that we're missing are those crazy elephants. Where did they walk off to? Wow. Big truck, little truck.
This goes on
Big
top.
boat, little boat.
I found one fire.
Two
Put
animals.
it behind all mine.
Oh,
Put it by mine.
I'm gonna line them all up together so it's one big line. Oh, good idea. And Messiah, you are really cooperating. That's awesome.
No, don't break them pieces.
Hold one hand. Hold the fruit with one hand and with the other hand you cut.
Oops, I broke it.
Hold the fruit.
That was
Okay, you want
The
some
good news is, Sean, he broke it, but he can put it back together.
If I broke mine, I can break mine back.
Yeah, that's the thing about puzzles is we put them together. Where'd that crazy elephant go, though? Huh? Oh, you found both of them? Awesome.
Put them together.
You gotta hold it.
Put them together.
Hold the piece.
Yay!
That is such a long line of puzzles. Can you believe you did all of those puzzles?
Yeah.
Oh, I would
1,
feel
2,
so
3,
proud.
4, 5.
Oh, are there 5 of them? Hey, let's count each one. Let's see. 1 puzzle, 2. Is it okay if I count them like that? Keep them like this. 1, 2. Help me. 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. What's the last one? I can't reach it. 9. You guys did 9 puzzles. Whew. What great workers. Yeah, are you proud of yourself? I am proud of you too. Are you proud of yourself? I am proud of you too. Now, how are we going to get these puzzles back in the box so that we can go play somewhere else? You're all done? Come tell Messiah it's your turn. Hey, Messiah, you worked so hard on these puzzles. I'll put them up for you, okay?
Okay.
And you can go to sand. Because Raji says it's your turn. Sean, I wonder, do they fit in? Yeah, it's your turn with the sand. Wait, I'm looking to see if they'll fit in like this when they're together. I don't know if they will or not. Look, oh, they fit right beside each other. You guys are so good at cleaning up. Wow. Thanks, Messiah. Thank you, Sean. Wow. Hey, would you like to do these puzzles? Sean just got finished.
All right. So what I want you to do is I'm going to give you the red state. So Messiah showed up and remember he tossed the puzzle pieces, then he was grunting. So what did you actually see? At least one thing. You may have seen multiples because she did a bunch of things. What did you see Rebecca do to support Messiah in getting to the green state where he actually started learning and he basically was regulated, because we've got to be regulated to learn. So the other piece, while you're thinking of your answer, that I skipped. So this is like a 1.5-day session that I edited down. But too often we believe that very young children, we tell them they need to regulate themselves, but we don't regulate, we co-regulate. And when we've co-regulated multiple times, that's how we actually get self-control. So we co-regulate with the regulated adult, which is the work of adults. It's the work of preschool teachers. It's the work of infant toddler teachers. It's the work of families. Then when children have that repeated experience multiple times, then later, when they're in the elementary school, they're able to gain self-control. And sometimes it's during the preschool years, but they need to do that with us early and often. So what did you see Rebecca do to support Messiah? Nell said she acknowledges frustration and tried to direct his activities to calm. Jen said she kept talking to him, acknowledged to continue to learn. Yet she did some specific things, Jen. She said, you look frustrated. She didn't say you are. She gave him a feeling word. She didn't respond with the negative, thank you, thank you. Is that Tani or Tony? From
Tani.
Okay, thank you. Yes, she didn't respond in that typical negative response in terms of, did you destroy those puzzle pieces? Go find somewhere else to play. She didn't run down that rabbit hole because it would have gotten her and him nowhere, because she already realized what he was a little bit agitated. So she connected with him, stayed calm so that he can connect to the calm so that she could elevate them. Definitely, Tony, that's so important. Yeah, once he became re-engaged and worked through his feelings, you can see his excitement. That's when the learning happens. He started counting the puzzle pieces. He wanted to put them together. And then it was his time to go. They signed up to use the sandbox so that it's not crowded with kids. So Raji came over to say, I'm done. And Messiah was next. And she said, Messiah, I'll clean up for you. You can go ahead. And this is what learning does. Learning actually pushes children to want to complete things. So the sense of completion took over. And Messiah said, no, I'm going to put the pieces back together because I feel good about what I did. I feel competent, not just confident, but competent, which is what you see there based on her receiving him in terms of that co-regulation piece as he gained self-control. So thank you all for sharing what you saw there. I actually edited a slide out. There's actually 17 things that she does. And in that slide that I took out, I list those 17 things. So let's jump more as we come to the close of the brain and movement. I like this slide from Dr. Chuck Hillman, because on the left side, we look at just the child who's sitting. And what you see at the top around that green is brain activity. That same child took a 20-minute walk and they put the MRI back on their kid's head. Look at how it's activated. So this is just more confirmation around movement and learning and how they're connected, and how for young Black boys, if not for all children, but definitely for young Black boys in early childhood, young children rest through movement. I'll say it again because it can be kind of complicated and it can go over your head. Young children rest through movement. I'll get really specific and say, young Black boys require movement to rest their bodies, their minds, and their souls. So what do you mean by that, Sean? What we mean by that is, as adults, when we're tired, we usually sit down, we take our shoes off, we rest that, or we might get a glass of red wine. We do whatever we're going to do to rest. We might put on some jazz. That's how we rest as adults. But for young children, because their bodies are in such a heightened state of growth and development, the movement is restful to them. So if we understand how necessary movement is to learning for Black boys, we don't remove it out of the program, we bring it more into our programs, which is, we're seeing the opposite. We're seeing less and less when we actually have neuroscience that says movement is connected to learning as early as possible. So we need to incorporate movement into our programs for little Black boys as a supportive strategy and as a teaching behavior, okay? So Kim, you said, is it possible to please share the 17 things in your Dropbox? What 17 things are you replying to, Kim? I'm not following you. What did I say? I'm not sure what I said. So help me out there, Kim. And then I'll keep looking at the chat box. So there's this notion of adulting on children that really is about adulting on little Black children, because the research says that when specifically, not just white folk, but even Black folk, when we see little Black boys who are 4, we think they're 10. When we see a 10-year-old, we assume he's 16. When we see a 16-year-old, we think he's what, 27. And this is real. I have a 17-year-old and a 16-year-old who are now driving. We had to have, and this is to your question earlier, Jen, the conversation around if and when you're stopped by the police, or if you're in an accident, Let's go over again and again and again what you're going to do. Because the 17-year-old can drive by himself. The 16-year-old can't drive by himself yet because he hasn't been driving long enough. So with the 17-year-old, there's some clear understanding on, we're going to practice this over and over, even though what? It hasn't happened yet. So we've got to prep them around those experiences that they see. We've got to talk about them, give them voice, that when we see people being murdered, talk about it. What do you think about that? Not saying this is what we think about it, but what do you think about it? What do you think happened? What's your take on what the news is saying? Did you read that article I sent you? What did you think about that, to the 16-year-old and the 17-year-old? But the conversation didn't start then. It starts early. It starts early, which is what we have to do. And it has to happen in multiple ways. And it doesn't have to be academic. It needs to be very, very child-centered and informal so that they want to respond. That's my feedback to that question, Jen. Oh, the 17 things that the teacher did that I took out. Oh, thank you. Okay, I definitely can add that slide to the Dropbox. Thank you, Kim. I'm old man, I forget things. So what I want you to do now is to take out your cell phone and open the calculator really quick. We're going to do this activity. We're going to do some basic math. So 365 times 2. When you get that answer, put it in the chat box. 365 times 2. 365 times 2. 730. That's right. That's Zoe Reed. 365 times 27. 365 times 27. 9,855. 365 times 3. 1,095. That's right, MJ. 365 times, oops, I'm sorry, 43. 365 times 43. That's right, Lenore. It is 15,695. 365 times 4. 1,460, and 365 times 57, 20,805. So for those of you who caught on, basically what you see on the right side, those are the number of days that a 2-year-old, the 3-year-old, and the 4-year-old have been alive, and the number of days that a 27-year-old, a 43-year-old, and a 57-year-old have been alive. So what we do when we adult on children is somebody who's been only alive for 730 days, we want them to show up the way someone who's been alive for 9,855 days are. So I've got 9,000 times to do this thing that I'm asking you to do, and you've only been alive for 730 days. And we do this to Black boys each and every day. The expectation is beyond their lived experience, and then we criticize them and we crucify them for not being able to do it. We call this adulting on young children. And what we know is that racial disparity exacerbates this for Black children. Part of that expulsion research looked at kindergarten entry for Black children. Black parents rated their children as having persistence, high approaches to learning, positive social interactions. And then when they got to school, the teacher rated them negative in all of those areas around kindergarten entry based on racial disparity. And then of course, because our research is all deficit-based, and we seem to only basis what research we do on Black children against white children without acknowledging that each and every time we do that, racism shows up. Because what we should be doing is saying, we're doing research on these group of Black children, and then we're doing research on this other group of Black children. What disparities do we see? But when we juxtapose it against white people, we're saying that the white is what? The standard. And each time we say that the white is the standard, we're pushing Black boys over the cliff. So this adulting on children is really, really persistent. And I need you all to get it so that we can do things within our programs and our policies to stop it. So another strategy is basically finding Black boys' strengths, their activity strengths, their relationship strengths, and their learning strengths. These are all simple strategies, but when we enact them, we can see the power behind them around following Black boys' leads, around activity strengths, tasks that they enjoy, that they feel safe and engaging in, relationship strengths. We know that no learning occurs outside of a safe relationship. When I was in grad school, I'm gonna share a true story. I was in California and I had a $60,000 scholarship to Mills College and a $10,000 book scholarship for grad school. Now I'm an HBCU graduate, undergrad, proud HBCU graduate, wouldn't change nothing else for that journey. So when I switched for grad school and I got there and my grad school coordinator, who I deemed as racist, literally I got sick. I got so sick that I gave the scholarship back and withdrew from the school, and everybody thought I was losing my mind. But I said, because there's no relationship here, and I was so steeped in not trusting her and what I was having to go through for a master's degree, I gave it back and said, I would rather get in debt and pay for this myself than to deal with this. And what was missing was the safe context of relationship. So I'm a learned adult who has coping strategies at this time. If I don't trust that adult and can't do it, you want 3 and 4-year-olds to do this? It's not going to happen. Then that supports our learning. Like that supports little Black boys learning that when we feel safe, that's where the learning occurs. When we feel understood, that's when the learning occurs. When it's meaningful to us, that's where the learning occurs. So HighScope did some research. I'm gonna put this one in the box too, because it's in one of the slides, but I just took a screenshot of it. But I'll actually add the whole thing because this group seems to want that information. Where they looked at preschool and they looked at little Black boys, particularly, but they call it boys of color. And I feel like that's code. Y'all need to understand that's code. When we're always saying boys of color, what we're really doing is it's a way for anti-Blackness to show up. Then when we say, well, out of the 100 kids here, 84 of them were little Black boys, then we should have been saying Black boys, not boys of color. I just need y'all to get the truth behind that narrative around how powerful language is and how it shows up without us examining it. And when it remains unchallenged, unchecked, and unchanged, we perpetuate it without even knowing it. But back to this learning strengths around how boys approach learning, what they found was that the vast majority of the teachers in early childhood who are female, and that's okay, stated, I'm uncomfortable with the way little boys want to play and how they want to learn. So because they want to play and learn this way, I shut it down. And when I shut it down, I realized that it's a problem, but I'm not willing to change. This is documented at Start. I mean, I had Start HighScope. So we've got to figure out a way to tap into that when adults are saying, I'm standing on this promise and I realize it's an inequity, but I'm not willing to move around how I dislike how little Black boys show up. We got a problem, Houston. We got a problem. So we can't always say it's white folk, because some of that is Black folk also. So one of the strategies that I recommend is there's a teacher-child relationship scale. There's actually 28 questions. I only put 10 here, but these questions really get at how does teachers respond to little Black boys? And they can use with all children, but really centered it around how they're responding to them and what's the answer, and can we interrogate their honest responses, okay? Around the lack of relationship, so the lack of learning isn't happening. So I'm going to move us into some research that supports that. So there are 4 universities. It's University of Virginia, the University in Oklahoma, then there's another one in the Midwest. They've been funded by the government to do some research that won't end until May of this year. They've been doing it for 3 years. So one of the themes were teacher-child relationships. So what they found, and you can go to Early Learning Network if you want to dig deeper into that. It's a great website. What they found was that as they were trying to measure teacher-child relationships, some things came up around quality indicators, around how children feel safe when teachers don't feel safe, unsafe classrooms, unsupportive teachers, and they kept interrogating the research around the need for positive interactions for children, and I would say Black children, the need for varied relationships for Black children, and the next slide is going to explain it, and when the relationship isn't in place, how engagement in the class doesn't happen. So what actually happened was, again, this is why I'm always slow to use people of color or children of color, because the research really was talking about little Black boys. So here's what they learned. And some of this may not be new to you, but this is current research, all right? That without the positive relationship, school adjustment outcomes actually were all negative. Why am I going to adjust to something when I'm afraid of the person who's in charge of the room? We also found, as they looked at math and social skills, that little Black boys were especially the target and weren't connecting around math and developing social skills. And that, of course, Black boys did not benefit in the absence of that positive relationship with their preschool teachers. And this isn't just one isolated incident. They're looking at programs across our country, folk, okay? Then they found that Black boys experience more conflict than white children. The real sad part is, as I kept digging deep, I was like, okay, so they're all talking about white teachers with little Black kids, right? Then it was like, wait a minute, they're talking about people who look just like these little Black boys who are treating them like other people that we think treat them. We've got to fix this, and we can fix this around what we internalize around Blackness and around Black males and Black boys. Then the teachers reported less closeness with students who were multilingual. So, you know, if you spoke an additional language other than English, they admitted that they were less close to those children who were oftentimes what? Not white. Black boys experience more conflict with their teachers. This is all preschool. So we're not talking about 5th grade. We're not talking about 9th grade. We're not talking about 12th grade. We're talking about early childhood, preschool specifically, all right? Then they found that one of the outbursts was the experiences were inequitable because of the lack of positive teacher-child relationships, okay? And that lack of relationship was setting little Black boys up on this course to always experience teachers as what? A threat, themselves as not being wanted and valued. So it impacts the learning, this perpetual cycle. So we have the data. So again, like I said in the earlier session, we've got to stop proving the problem. And we kind of proved the problem here, but we know what the solutions are. So what we need to do is push for the solutions, because we've already got decades and decades of proving the problem. We need the solutions to these to be what we talk about and what we do, what we talk about and what we do. Not just write down, but actually enact, not just make it a policy, not just put it in our program report, but make sure it's a practice that everybody understands around our role in having multidisciplinary employees and staff, no matter what our program is around how we respond to Black boys and their Black families. So this is the supporting interest of boys high scope report that I was talking about, that I'll add for those who wanna read it. So we're going to jump right into strategies, some ways that we can support Black boys, some ways that we can support Black boys. So Dominique said, facts, as a male teacher, I've seen it in the beginning that they tried to stop me and get me to teach as a female would. So I'm thinking of Mahalani, bless her soul. She passed away last year, right before Christmas. But I was working with them as a project, a temporary project once, and she called me once and she said, you know, I need you to come to my site. And she was in a panic. So I jumped in the car and drove across Marin County because she's in Sausalito. And I got there and I said, what's the problem? And she said, I need you to talk to William and Manaima. So at the time, William was 22 and Manaima was what, 19. She says, I don't like the way they're playing with all the kids. You know, they're doing what we want them to do. They're on the ground, the children are with them, but it was this big body play. And what happened was, as I continued to talk, Mahalani said, I was sitting on the ground on the floor and 2 of the little boys jumped on me the way they jump on William and Manaima, and it scared her. It scared her so much, she jumped up and ran and called me and said, I need you to talk to them because I need this to stop. And I didn't want it to stop. What we needed to do was to have a conversation around having the children know that Mr. William and Miss Manaima says it's okay to play with me this way, but Miss Mahalani, who's the site director, when she's in the room, she doesn't want you to play with her that way. So we don't necessarily stop it, but we have the children compartmentalize. I want you to play with me this way. I'm okay with it, but she's not. So we had to have a different kind of conversation around supporting that necessary big body play, whereas the site director was like, help me shut this down. And I'm like, no, we're not going to do that. They're actually here for a reason, you know, to help reduce what we think are problems that aren't problems, because we have adults who we value, but who don't and can't engage that way. So that was just an ongoing conversation that we had to have. All right. Please show the high scope study. So it's really, they did this thing called extensions where they would write about topics. So it wasn't necessarily a study, but they would write about topics, and then they would publish it, and they would like write what the topic was about, give you like a training piece, do an inclusion piece on it. So it's supporting the interests of boys. I'm going to put it in the Dropbox. I just can't do that right now because I'm speaking. But here's some ways to support Black boys that we know work. These are research-based, and I've used them, and I attest that they actually work. As much as you can, incorporating music and movement into everything you do with little Black boys for positive interactions. And then for children who are a little bit more stressed, incorporating more physical activities, or if you have children who are on the autism spectrum. So I'm thinking of Esther, you know, it was about 4 years ago. So I came to coach her, and she said, you know, I'm about to quit and retire and just call it a day. And I said, what happened, Esther? I'm thinking it was something programmatically. She said, there are 3 little boys in this room who are all on the autism spectrum, 3 in one room. So we sat down, and some of the slides that you saw, we talked about brains and how we need to move first and then rest. So Esther made a slight shift. She didn't really change much. What she did was, instead of having them come into class, you know, they're all being welcomed, move to circle time, then move to free choice, then move to outside before lunch. What she did was, after everyone was there, at 8:50, they went outside for an hour. At 8:50. So that hour that they had outside before they transitioned inside, had circle, and then had free choice, she saw a shift in those 3 boys' behavior. So when I came back, I was like, are we still moving, Esther? Because I'm going to come, because she said she was moving back to Peru. And I'm thinking, I'm coming to visit you in Peru. She was like, what are you talking about, Sean? I'm not going anywhere. I said, but the boys. She said, look. I said, what happened? What happened? I said, you gave them some children's Tylenol? I'm joking. She said, no. She said, what we talked about, we go outside. So then her conversation was, the problem is the other classes want to come outside now. I love it just being out there with just me and my kids. Now they're all wanting to come outside. And I said, no. So it turned into this other issue because she was bragging around how things were working. Just testament of letting the children move before we ask them to sit still and regulate. She saw the benefit of it. So another strategy is using emotional connections first. And I know we all feel pressure that they want us to teach content. We're being standardized and test scores. So is that shifting both? But what we find is the content will never happen if I've got to keep stopping to address what? Behavior and social emotional needs. So address that early and often. So by the end of October, November, that's pretty much solid. And then the 1 or 2 kids that percolate up, we can use those intensive pieces like physical activities and other pieces to meet their need, but it won't be 10, it might be 1 or 2. The other part is using verbal and visual directions. So here's what the research says. All of us remember 85% of what we see and 10% of what we hear, which is why you get in the slides are so important. So for adults, that's like driving down the street. We see this big red sign that says stop. We see these lights that blink. Those are our visual reminders of what we're expected to do. But when you're saying every day, Sean, stop running, and I keep running, it's because I need what? Different language. Sean, we walk inside, which is fundamentally how you want my brain to map, and a picture of what? Maybe some feet walking. So incorporating that, we found helps Black boys, if not all children, in that Black boys should see themselves in the classroom. So if you don't have books and materials that represent them, take pictures of them and incorporate that into your learning environment with them. Other ways to support Black boys as we come up on the end is using the precise language around what you want them to do and not generalizing with Black boys or Black children for that sake. Giving Black boys endless opportunities for open-ended creativity and see what they come up with. Then learning yourself what relaxation techniques you can use and work with, like breathing or stretching, and incorporating those into your time with Black boys. This notion of actually using pacing inside and outside, not moving fast sometimes slowing down, and watch and see what boys percolate up when we slow down. So if you're like me, I tend to move fast, I speak fast. I'm from Philadelphia, even though I lived in the South, lived in the West, it's just a part of my constitution. And I know when I slow myself down and start to watch differently, I pick up on different things and I see children and adults differently. All right. And this other piece is just reminding Black boys that they're safe. So Jim brought this up earlier around the unsafe things that they see happen to adult Black men. We still don't want them to carry that narrative at 3, 4, and 5 that they're unsafe. We should be reminding them that when they're with us at school, that they are safe. I'm in that context so that they can learn. Because if I'm walking around thinking I'm unsafe all day long, no learning will occur. In the midst of potentially living in an unsafe neighborhood, we don't want that to be the narrative that carries them. The narrative that carries them should be, when you're here with me in this Head Start classroom, when you're here with me in our pre-K classroom, you are safe and we can learn. Come on, let's find something to do together, or let's create what I like to call a play plan. What's your plan? And I use that in terms of Black boys and behavior when I'm consulting with teachers, because I've never had a kid say, my plan is to go push the fish tank down. My plan is to go pull her hair. My plan is to go kick them. My plan is to go knock down their blocks. I've never had them say that to me. So when I say, what's your play plan? I'm pushing them from what? That yellow zone or that red zone into the green zone. Let's think about it together. Come on, hold Mr. B's hand. Let's go find something. Let's see where no one is in the classroom and maybe we can find something to do there. So I don't send them by themselves. They need me to be the anchor. I do it along with them. Strategy that works. So another strategy that works for little Black boys as we pull up the rear is what we call HOMES. So HOME stands for hands-on, open-ended, meaningful, engaging, and sensory-oriented. So if you use these 5 things, I guarantee you're spot on. Hands-on, open-ended, meaningful, engaging, and sensory-oriented. If I was looking for a different word, because if sensory-oriented could be first, I think that should be first, but it's so close to hands-on. But HOMES is a strategy, and I won't get into it because it's in the slide deck, but use this as another strategy for teachers to incorporate in their work with young Black boys. That's true, Dominique. You can't. If you despise me, you can't teach me. So this research here, I put this one up because I cite this one all the time. This one's marked up. So if you wanted me to share this one, I've already highlighted it. And I usually talk to myself when I'm reading. Some of my personal thoughts are on the PDF. But it really looked at the behaviors that we see in little Black boys who have learning disabilities look identical to little Black boys who have high IQs. So we're seeing 2 people who are at different ends of the continuum, but the behavior manifests the same way. Why does it manifest the same way? It's because too many little Black boys who have high IQs are in spaces and places where no one's tapping into that. So their behavior starts to regress. And that's why their behavior manifests the same way as someone who has a learning disability, who doesn't have that skill set. I think this is powerful for us to understand. And this research goes back to 1977. So this isn't new. We've known this for years. And why we're not talking about it? Well, that's why we're here today, to bring some of that knowledge to our community so that we can spread it early and often. So this slide, I moved away from the other brain slides on purpose because I think when we're talking about the brain, so much happens. But when we're thinking of those so-called high IQ little Black boys and the ones who need some additional support, we value all of them, but this is how their behavior shows up differently. So this notion of a stress behavior and a misbehavior, we often collapse them on top of each other and think they're the same, and they are not when we're talking about little Black boys. All children, but specifically for little Black boys, I can have a stress behavior and the teacher sees it as a misbehavior. You know, everything is oftentimes a misbehavior because we don't recognize stress behavior around brain states and what's happening differently in little kids' brains because they're male and they're Black. Remember Walter Gilliam, big Black boys, 2, 3, and 4 of age, but I still see what? A 20, a 25, and a 30-year-old when I see a 2, a 3, and a 4-year-old. I just can't fathom how jacked up that is, but it's a too often reality for those of us, specifically those of us who have little Black boys in our lives. So on the misbehavior side, this is when that green zone of the prefrontal cortex, that's our go brain, it's just running slow. It could be running slow because I didn't get enough sleep, you know, I didn't eat enough breakfast, or I had the wrong thing for breakfast. Maybe I'm not feeling well. Maybe I'm almost getting sick. Or maybe I'm just bored as heck because Miss Tammy's circle is boring. What she has available for me in the classroom is boring. I'm just bored out of my little 4-year-old mind. So my brain starts to slow down, right? So this is developmental in nature. So the teacher has to investigate the possibility of these causes. So the work is for the adult, not the child. This is a misbehavior. Then there's a stress behavior. The stress behavior is when my green brain is not even online. The stress behavior is if my red brain or my yellow brain has taken over and they're running the show. I'm not aware of what I'm doing all the time. This is like the difference between having a tantrum and having a meltdown. The behaviors can look the same, but they emanate from totally different places. Okay, tantrum, I'm in control. I'm not getting something I want. Meltdown, my sensory system is taking over and I'm not thinking. My body's responding to what's happening inside of me. We've got to understand by being investigators and saying why this little black boy and why now as the response before we come to a conclusion. Very, very important. I highly recommend if you're a director, print this slide out and hang it in all your classrooms, just so that teachers can see they need to be aware of the difference between the misbehavior and the stress behavior. So Courtney says a lot of educators don't realize how boredom can be the precursor to behaviors. Yeah, I would say a lot of coaches and directors, a lot of adults, parents, some of us don't understand that. So the next two slides I'm not going to necessarily go over because they're just information purposes. And they're from Dr. Richard Milner, who writes about this, but he writes in a more global context around like the preschool to high school. But in his text, there is a chapter devoted to preschool education. And what I find is a lot of people who do the K through 12 work, when their young children are in preschool and they're experiencing it as a parent, they all start to write about it. J. Luke Woods did it in California. Rich Million does it. A lot of people, when their children are in preschool and they start to go through these things, that's when they start writing about it because it becomes a real lived experience for them. And I'm always thinking, did you not believe us who've been in this work for decades that what we were saying was real? But we value their added contributions. So these two slides really just look at the difference between guiding children and punishing children as we create our policies, as we adapt our policies and look at changing our policies. All right. So this slide that I'm not going to go over because it's in the handout that you can read, just really looks at what we used to believe about Black boys and what we now know around practices that we should be using and, encouraging on the right side. So we used to believe that boys should sit still. They needed us to do things for them, that if they were distracted and messy, it was problems. We needed to solve their problems for them. And then we needed to praise them. We need to make them feel good, not develop any competency, but develop, that I feel good, and feeling good was all. And what we know is 40 years of that research has shown that those adults who are between 40 and 50, whose parents just told them how great they were, actually aren't doing too well as adults. So I'm going to pause for a moment and look at the last parts of this notion of praise, and what process praise and how process praise is different than praise. So what the research found was, and this was research, this is Carol Dweck, the fixed mindset lady who most people get wrong. So her original research she did with fifth graders, then she went back, and this is what most people don't realize, and they did a longitudinal study where they tracked children from ages 2 to 7. And what they found was those children whose parents and caregivers use process praise. So Carol says, I use the word praise because it's familiar to parents, and this work isn't just for teachers, it's for families. Whereas those of us in education will say, we don't praise children, we use acknowledgement. And she says, I get that, and this is what this is about, but those words aren't familiar to parents. And I stand with her in that. But here's what her research found, that we actually kind of process praise or praise children in 3 different categories. So we give them flat praise. Flat praise is good job and I like. And what they found was children gain nothing, zero, zilch. When they hear us say good job and I like, they get nothing. The second characteristic part of praise was characteristic praise. Characteristic praise is often, oh, I like your glasses. That's a pretty sweater. Look at your new sneakers. Those are nice jeans. Then they found that overwhelmingly teachers commented characteristic praise on female students over male students. So it was really based on little girls. And then when that stopped, when they got to middle school, they end up sometimes having self-esteem problems because everybody's shopping at the same store. So nobody's telling you yours looks nice the way they did when I was 4 and 5. Here's the part, the worker, the process praise. Children who heard process comments, meaning while I'm engaged in what I'm doing my homework. And then my mother comes over and she says, Sean, you've been working on that math homework for a while. That's all she says. She doesn't say, are you finished? Are you done? Is it hard? She acknowledges my actions and effort towards the goal. I'll say it again. She acknowledges my actions and effort towards the goal. And what they found was when caregivers or teachers and parents acknowledge a child's actions and efforts towards a goal, they develop two things: perseverance and pro-social skills at age 7. Most of us are in second grade at age 7. So when they actually did that, that was something that didn't cost any money. It just cost me the comment to notice what my child is doing, to notice what the little black boy is doing in my preschool classroom. Comment on it, not a question, a process comment about that actions and effort towards the goal. Because the comment isn't about the goal. I may not reach the goal. If I have strong behaviors and I'm learning some new pieces, I may not be able to do that in the next month or two. It may take me 6 months to be able to do that individually, but the process comments provided those children with pro-social skills and perseverance at second grade. So what that means is I'm in second grade, we're having that benign Friday test that Nell Duke says we should do away with. And I get stumped on number 3. Children with perseverance will raise their hand and say, Mr. Dominique, can you come help me? I'm confused about number 3. And then he says, oh, Sean, remember on Wednesday when we were talking about when the wind blows in wind chimes or whatever it was, and he activates what my memory, he doesn't give me the answer. Children without perseverance get to number 3 and do two things. They get confused and say, I don't know this answer. They write a nonsense answer, or they stop taking the test. Children with pro-social skills, we're in the hallway. Ed bumps me. When Ed bumps me, he bumps me. So instead of me pushing him, I say, oh, excuse me. That's what pro-social skills look like. And those are two life skills that children can take with them throughout their life. I think that's quite powerful. And it's something that children are gaining, specifically little black boys, when they have caregivers and parents who actually understand the power of acknowledging what children are engaged in. All right, so we're pulling up the rear. We're pulling up the rear. So I'm going to give you some of the data in that first school book. So Sharon Ritchie and her team says early on, too many minority boys lose their sense of eagerness and excitement. And I like the book, but they're using minority boys because it's really Black and Latinx boys that they're specifically talking about, but it wasn't 50-50, it was 70-30. I'm just saying, but they were there, so we acknowledged them. They lose a sense of eagerness and excitement about school and adopt a position of passive or aggressive disengagement that often leads to later school dropout. They also found that boys of depressed mothers appear to be especially vulnerable to the effects of maternal depression. Really, really important for us to tap into this. Then we found that boys are less mature than girls in the early years, and therefore their abilities need adaptive behavior regulation, what Rebecca was doing with Messiah. Remember I said, for those who were in the other session, boys, and this is normal, this isn't maladaptive or atypical, male children typically lag behind female children 6 to 9 months in walking, talking, and pottying. So if that's exacerbated by me having a depressed parent and it's not been diagnosed, that may further exacerbate my development. We've got to understand this in the context of our early learning settings. So Sharon Ritchie's work, back to her work, what they found was that positive teacher-child interactions were the foundation of children being able to maintain creativity and be engaged in learning. They also found that the emotional quality of the classroom, someone who was at Kay Wilson said the tone, like how teachers showed up. Remember earlier in the other session, we said it's not about being nice to children, but children getting, my teacher wants to be here. I feel and sense that my teacher wants to be here, sets the emotional tone. This reminds me of Miss Cynthia Hammock. She's since retired. She was a Head Start director in California. And one day I showed up as the mental health consultant and I walked in at 8 a.m. and I could feel in the building that something was off. Now, she had been saying for months, I'm going to go to Sacramento when my daughter has a baby. She's having it on this date. I'm going to be in Sacramento. And I just forgot. I'm at all these sites. So I show up and I say to LaTanya, I say, what's going on? And she says, Miss Cynthia's not here. Angie's in charge. So I go to Angie's room and Angie is a wreck. She's nervous. She's anxious. She's saying, I'm in charge and everybody keeps asking me questions. So that emotional quality in that center dropped because everybody could feel what Angie was holding. So the tone that you set as the teacher, as the center director, isn't just in your head, is permeating communally throughout the site, throughout the classroom. So your tone can actually set the rest of the day, or it can wreck the rest of the day. You got to tap into that. I think it's an untapped piece around how we can show up differently. And of course, Sharon Ritchie and her team found that warm relationships with children actually decrease what they call challenging behaviors. So they also found that, and we're wrapping it up here, children were distracted. So the green bar that you see going up is whole group time, circle time. And then the kind of gold bar that you see is individual time. That's time when the teacher tells the boys what to do and walks away, which is different than small group, which is the 10%, that's that teal color. So whole group and individual time are when these boys, Black boys and Latinx boys, were distracted and they found it hard to stay engaged. And we know this, but we haven't changed our teaching strategies around them being distracted in the early learning settings. All right, so here's one of my favorite slides. So the research also found that the resting brains of boys fall asleep. So we talked about this in the other session, meaning when boys are sitting in circle and the teacher's doing too much talking the way I'm doing, the boys tap out and they stop listening, where little girls, they found, would attend 5 to 7 minutes longer. We know that boys are more emotionally sensitive. This is from birth. So if you read the book Raising Cain, and the documentary was on, the movie was on YouTube, it may still be there. Around 23 minutes in, they actually do like the still face experiment, but with boys and little girls. And they found the difference between the little girls. When the little girl's mother turned away, they were all like, okay, she's not looking at me, but I'm okay. I see her right there. When the mother lost the gaze with the little boy, all the little boys broke down. So this is when I was talking earlier around this thing called androgen, that what they believe is because little male children brains are washed in androgen, they believe that that's the emotional center that little boys are born with, but we socialize it out of them early, which is why oftentimes we have behavioral challenges with little boys more than little girls, because their emotional needs are not being met. You know, this notion of little man at 3, I think has consequences when we're talking to a 3-year-old and putting this word man and not realizing what we're really expecting behind that word. Just something to consider and be reflective about. Their imagination, open space, and of course, movement. They found that when boys had multiple opportunities to move, their behaviors shifted and their impulse behaviors were reduced. These are all strategies. These are all strategies. Then they also found that this kind of slower developmental timeline that I talked about, but when the teacher is misattuned, attunement isn't the same as attachment. And we don't talk about this enough in early childhood. Attachment is what children should do with their mothers and fathers and grandmothers. What they should get from us is attunement that says, I see you, I understand what your needs are here in the context of the classroom, and I'm attuning to you so that you can thrive. Fundamentally different, okay? In these next 2 slides, they're really just things that we can do in the context of our classrooms to help Black boys thrive. Again, notice it keeps coming up: movement, encouraging their intention, making the transition shorter and smoother, using visuals, and making sure what we actually are finding is that oftentimes, because we're telling Black boys to stop and to sit down, they end up moving further away from the teacher. And the further away from the teacher they are, they actually can't see or hear, so they start distracting themselves. So we need to make sure that they can see and hear as a strategy in helping them thrive. All right, so we did it this time, Ashley. So instead of focus on, this is the closing slide, instead of focusing on what children can't do yet, instead of focusing on what families don't do, instead of focusing on what teachers won't do, and instead of focusing on what leaders didn't do, let's focus on what we can all accomplish together for little Black boys, not just as a strategy, but as something that in the future, some of us won't even see. So let's affect the future in the way that sometimes seems unimaginable. So thank you all for your time and your space today. Unlike the last one where we ran out of time, I think this would be a great time to finish up in these last 3 minutes. If you all have questions, I'll actually add those other pieces to the Dropbox. But if someone has questions, I'm going to stop sharing the screen. I would love to respond to your question or thought. And I think while we're doing that, it would be great if everyone could put in the chat, because I believe this adult learning is important. If you could put in the chat one takeaway that you're taking back to your work from the session, just one takeaway that you're taking back to your session. If you work with parents, if you work with adult learners, if you work with young children, if you work with children and adults, if you just work at the policy level, just one takeaway you're taking back to your work. I would love for you all to put that in the chat.
Mr. Bryant, I would like to thank you. You actually made me want to go do some research.
Okay.
I feel inspired. I wish I would have known you 30 years ago when I was raising my children. I don't know where you were, but I was looking for you. I needed you.
I was in Atlanta in Stone Mountain off of Panola Road.
Oh, listen, I'm in Stone Mountain,
okay.
off right off Main Street. I won't give her my address.
Right.
And I'm originally from Los Angeles, California. So,
okay.
You sound like good people, but I want to thank you today. This was just awesome. Awesome. I appreciate you. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. Awesome. I'm appreciating the comments. Movement. The stages of praise. Yeah. Black boys need to be nurtured. When I see young Black boy appearing to be disruptive, find a way to redirect. That's right. The Cobb County School representing. Okay, Kim. Thank you so much. I attended the class for research and reliable information. Thank you, Lenore. Kim says you're motivational speaker. Provide more time for children to explore their feelings. Movement. Yeah, it's a strategy and it's key. Yeah, definitely movement to stories. Well, which is I wish I knew you. You know me now though, so don't consider the past. You know me now. So thank you, Taylor, for that comment. Thank you, Santika. Awesome. Yeah, remember that 6 to 9 months. That's really important, Bonnie. Really, really important. And most people who actually do the work, most toddler teachers can tell you, most of the girls potty before the little boys. They start expressing language before the little boys. But there's one caveat. We got 1 minute left before Ashley cuts me off. So expressive language and expressive language are not parallel. And this is research from there in Chicago. What we know is that toddlers' receptive language, what they hear and understand, exceeds their expressive language by 12 to 24 months. So that means when you're talking to toddlers, this is why language-rich environments are so important. They might not say back to you, oh, Miss Charmaine, okay, I'm going to do that. They oftentimes look at you. And what they found was they actually understand, but they're not going to express it back because that expressive speech usually catches up around 3 or 3.5. But that doesn't mean we shouldn't stop talking to them. A really, really key piece around toddlers and language development as a parting thought. Thank you all. Thank you all. Have a rest of great training. I'll be here throughout the day in other sessions. So thank you. And I'll put in for those who came later, in the chat box one last time before Ashley pushes us out, the Dropbox link so that you can access the slides from this session and the one earlier. And I'm hearing that they're both recorded. And I will add those other pieces that you all asked to that Dropbox once we all get out the Zoom session. So have a great day and continue the learning experience.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Sean. That Dropbox links in itself is just such an invaluable repository of information. We're so honored to host you here today. So thank you for just being you and the work that you do.
Thank you.
Now, everyone, we're going to take a brief lunch break. So please be sure to join us back in the main room. You can get that link on your Sched. We will be back in the main room at 12:45 Eastern. We're going to have some more energizers, more door prizes, a musical performance, and still our keynote to come. So please make sure that you're back promptly at 12:45 Eastern, and you can get that link on your Sched. So enjoy your lunch break and see you soon. Thanks again, Sean. Have a good day.
All right. Take care, everyone.